The coffee was cold again. Lieutenant Sarah Chen stared at the brown liquid in her cup, watching the oil slick pattern swirl on its surface. Around her, the bustling command center of the Galactic Defense Station hummed with activity. Alien officers from dozens of species moved between holographic displays, their voices creating a symphony of clicks, whistles, and translated speech. But nobody looked at her. Sarah had been stationed here for 3 years now. 3 long years of being the only human on a station populated by beings who seemed to view her species as barely evolved primates. The Zephyrians with their crystalline bodies that caught light like living diamonds, the Kronak warriors whose thick hides could stop plasma bolts, the graceful Etherians who floated rather than walked, all of them had centuries of space travel behind them. Advanced technologies that made human achievements look primitive. She pushed back from her workstation and walked to the large viewport that dominated the eastern wall. Outside, the spiral arms of the Andromeda Galaxy stretched endlessly, dotted with the lights of 1,000 civilizations. Somewhere out there, Earth continued its slow orbit around an unremarkable yellow star, its people unaware that their daughter was sitting in one of the most advanced military installations in known space. Commander Vextar approached, his 6 legs clicking against the metal floor. The arachnoid officer had been her supervisor since she arrived, and while he was never openly hostile, Sarah could feel his disappointment every time he assigned her to another routine task. Lieutenant Chen. His translated voice carried the usual tone of polite disinterest. I need you to run diagnostics on Communications Array 7. Standard procedure, nothing complicated. Sarah saluted, though the gesture felt hollow. Yes, sir. Should I file a report on completion? Only if there are anomalies. Vextar was already turning away. Which there won't be. Human technology is reliable in its simplicity. The word stung, but Sarah had heard variations of this sentiment countless times. Humans were seen as useful for basic tasks, their technology adequate for simple jobs, their thinking predictable and limited. They were the custodians of the galaxy, not its guardians. She made her way through the corridors toward the communications section, passing groups of officers who barely acknowledged her presence. A cluster of Zephyrian technicians were discussing quantum encryption methods that their species had developed, while humans were still fighting with bronze weapons. 2 Kronak warriors compared stories of battles fought across star systems, their scarred hides testament to conflicts humans had never even heard of. The communications array was located in a quieter section of the station, where the hum of machinery replaced the chatter of voices. Sarah began her diagnostics, running through the checklist she could perform in her sleep. Signal strength, frequency clarity, quantum entanglement stability. Everything was functioning normally as it always was. But as she worked, something caught her attention. A faint irregularity in the background noise, so subtle that the standard sensors hadn't detected it. Sarah frowned, adjusting the sensitivity of her equipment. There it was again, a pattern hidden beneath the cosmic static. Her heart began to race as she isolated the signal. It wasn't random. There was structure to it, a rhythm that suggested intelligence. But more than that, there was something familiar about the pattern. She had studied enough xenolinguistics to recognize communication attempts, and this felt different from anything in the known databases. Sarah ran the signal through every analysis protocol she could access. The results made her hands shake. The transmission was coming from the edge of the galaxy, from a region that long-range sensors had always shown as empty. But if her readings were correct, something was out there. Something big. She grabbed her personal communicator, then hesitated. Who would believe her? A human claiming to have discovered something that the advanced sensor arrays of a dozen species had missed? They would assume she had made an error, that her limited understanding had led her to misinterpret normal stellar phenomena. But the signal was real. Sarah was certain of it. She decided to work quietly, using her off-duty hours to gather more data. If she could present concrete evidence, irrefutable proof, then maybe someone would listen. She copied the signal data to her personal storage unit and began the slow process of analysis. Over the following weeks, Sarah maintained her normal routine while secretly working on the mystery signal. She discovered that the transmission came in bursts occurring roughly every 47 hours. The pattern was complex, layered with multiple frequency bands that suggested a sophisticated communication system. But what worried her most was the direction the signals were coming from. They originated from beyond the galactic rim, from the vast emptiness between galaxies. According to everything they knew about the universe, nothing lived in that void. Nothing could survive the journey between galaxies, crossing millions of light years of empty space. Unless something had. Sarah's research began to paint a terrifying picture. The signals showed signs of movement, getting slightly stronger with each transmission. Whatever was out there was coming closer, and if her calculations were correct, it was heading directly toward their galaxy. She tried to approach Commander Vextar with her findings, but he dismissed her concerns before she could even explain. "Lieutenant, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but sensor analysis is not a human strength. The station's dedicated xenobiologists would have detected any significant anomalies. Please focus on your assigned duties." Sarah felt the familiar burn of frustration. Her assigned duties. Always her assigned duties. Never anything that mattered, never anything that used her actual skills. She had graduated top of her class from the Solar Academy, had degrees in both xenobiology and quantum communications, but here she was treated like a maintenance worker. But she couldn't let this go. The signals were real, and they were getting stronger. Something was coming from the void between galaxies, and she might be the only person who knew about it. The weight of that knowledge settled on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. That night, Sarah sat in her small quarters staring at the data, scrolling across her personal terminal. Lines of code and signal analysis that told a story no one else would believe. She thought about Earth, about her family who had been so proud when she was selected for the Galactic Defense Program. They believed she was helping to protect humanity's place among the stars. If only they knew how little that place actually meant. Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She was going to keep investigating, even if it meant working alone, even if it meant being overlooked and dismissed. Because sometimes the people no one expects to matter are the ones who matter most. 3 months had passed since Sarah first detected the anomalous signals, and the situation had grown worse, much worse. She sat hunched over her workstation in the early hours of the station's artificial morning, when most of the crew was asleep. The data flowing across her screens would have terrified anyone who understood what they were looking at. The signals were no longer coming from the edge of the galaxy. They were coming from inside it. Sarah rubbed her tired eyes and took another sip of the bitter stimulant that passed for coffee in the station's dispensers. She had been surviving on 3 hours of sleep per night, using every spare moment to track the mysterious transmissions. What she had discovered defied everything the galaxy's greatest minds believed about interstellar travel. The signals were moving too fast. Whatever was sending them was crossing distances that should have taken years in mere weeks. Even with the most advanced faster-than-light technology known to the Galactic Alliance, such speeds were impossible. But the evidence was undeniable. The source was now less than 50 light-years away and closing fast. A soft chime indicated someone entering her section. Sarah quickly minimized her personal research and brought up the routine diagnostics she was supposed to be working on. To her surprise, it wasn't Commander Vextar but Dr. Kael'thar, the station's chief xenobiologist. The Etherian scientist floated toward her, his translucent form shimmering in the artificial light. Dr. Kael'thar was one of the few beings on the station who had ever shown Sarah any respect, perhaps because his species valued curiosity over prejudice. "Working early again, Lieutenant Chen?" His voice carried the musical quality typical of his people, even through the translation matrix. "Just routine maintenance, Doctor," Sarah replied, hoping her exhaustion didn't show. Dr. Kael'thar moved closer, and Sarah noticed his usual calm demeanor seemed strained. "I've been monitoring some unusual energy readings from the outer sensors. Nothing conclusive, but patterns that seem familiar somehow. I was wondering if you had noticed anything in the communications arrays." Sarah's heart raced. This was the opening she had been waiting for, a chance to share her findings with someone who might actually listen. But years of dismissal had made her cautious. "What kind of patterns, Doctor?" "Structured emissions that don't match any known natural phenomena. They appear to be artificial, but the source is unclear." Dr. Kael'thar's large silver eyes studied Sarah carefully. "You've been working with the communication systems longer than anyone else currently stationed here. I thought perhaps you might have insights that our standard protocols missed." Sarah made a decision that would change both their lives. She glanced around to ensure they were alone, then brought up her hidden files. "Doctor, what I'm about to show you will sound impossible, but I've been tracking these signals for months and they're not coming from anywhere in our galaxy originally." Dr. Kael'thar's form brightened. a sign of increased attention among his species. Show me. For the next hour, Sarah walked the xenobiologist through her research. She showed him the signal patterns, the movement calculations, the frequency analysis that suggested a technology far beyond anything the Galactic Alliance possessed. Dr. Kael'thar listened without interruption, his scientific mind processing the implications. "This is extraordinary work, Lieutenant," he said finally. "But the conclusions, if you're correct, we're facing something unprecedented, something that shouldn't be possible according to our understanding of physics." "I know how it sounds," Sarah said, "but the data doesn't lie. Whatever this is, it's been traveling between galaxies, and now it's here." Dr. Kael'thar was quiet for a long moment, his form dimming as he considered the implications. "Have you shared this with Commander Vexistar?" "I tried." He dismissed it without even looking at the evidence. Said sensor analysis wasn't a human strength. The Etherian's form flickered with what Sarah had learned to recognize as anger. Vextar is a competent administrator, but he has the typical arachnoid prejudice against younger species. This is exactly the kind of thinking that could get us all killed. Before Sarah could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Red lights bathed the corridors as the emergency klaxon echoed through the metal halls. Sarah and Dr. Kael'thar rushed to the nearest status display. The screen showed a tactical overview of the local star system. At the edge of the display, moving toward the station at impossible speed, was a contact unlike anything in their databases. The object was massive, easily the size of a small moon, and it was decelerating from faster-than-light travel. "All personnel to battle stations." Commander Vexistar's voice crackled over the communication system. "Unknown contact approaching." "This is not a drill." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "Doctor, look at the energy signature." Dr. Kael'thar's eyes widened as he studied the readings. The signature was identical to the signals Sarah had been tracking. Whatever had been sending those transmissions had finally arrived. The command center was chaos when they arrived. Officers from a dozen species rushed between stations, their voices creating a cacophony of translated panic. The main display showed the approaching object in greater detail, and what they saw defied explanation. The vessel, if it could be called that, appeared to be partially organic. Its surface writhed with movement, and energy patterns flowed across its hull like luminous veins. It was clearly artificial, but unlike any technology in the Alliance databases. Status report. Commander Vextar called out as he scuttled between workstations. "Contact is maintaining approach vector," reported the Zephyrian sensor operator. "Estimated arrival in 6 hours. No response to communication attempts. Weapon status? All defensive systems online and charged." "But sir, the energy readings from that thing. Our weapons might not be effective." Sarah watched the displays with growing dread. The object's size and the power readings it was generating dwarfed anything the station could bring to bear. If it was hostile, they were in serious trouble. "Commander," Dr. Kael'thar stepped forward. "Lieutenant Chen has been tracking transmissions from this entity for months. Her research might provide insight into its intentions." Vextar's multiple eyes fixed on Sarah with obvious irritation. "Dr. Kael'thar, this is not the time for human theories. We need real solutions." "Sir, with respect," Sarah found her voice despite her fear. "I've been analyzing their communication patterns. I might be able to establish contact." "Absolutely not. Communication protocols will be handled by our xenolinguistics team. You will monitor secondary systems and report any anomalies." Sarah felt the familiar frustration boil over into anger. "Commander, I've been studying these signals for months while your xenolinguistics team didn't even know they existed. Maybe if you listened to your crew instead of dismissing them based on their species, we might have been better prepared for this." The command center fell silent. Sarah realized she had just committed career suicide, but she no longer cared. Something was approaching that could threaten the entire galaxy, and they were too caught up in their prejudices to listen to the one person who might understand it. Commander Vextar's mandibles clicked ominously. "Lieutenant Chen, you are relieved of duty. Report to your quarters for disciplinary review." "Sir, wait," Dr. Kael'thar interjected. "Her research is sound. We should at least consider—" "The decision is made, Doctor. Security, escort the lieutenant to her quarters." As the security officers approached, alarms blared again. This time, the tactical display showed something that made everyone's blood run cold. The massive object had launched smaller vessels, dozens of them, each one the size of a battleship. They were spreading out in a search pattern, moving toward inhabited systems throughout the sector. Sarah looked at the display with a sinking heart. The invasion had begun, and she was the only one who might have been able to prevent it. As security led her away, she caught Dr. Kelthar's eye. The Etherian gave her a subtle nod, and she realized that not everyone had given up on her yet. Sarah paced her small quarters like a caged animal, listening to the muffled sounds of panic echoing through the station's corridors. Through her viewport, she could see the alien vessels moving through space with predatory grace, their organic hulls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that hurt to look at directly. The door chimed, and she expected to see security guards coming to formally arrest her. Instead, Dr. Kelthar materialized through the wall, his Etherian ability to phase through solid matter coming in handy for clandestine visits. "Doctor, you shouldn't be here," Sarah said, though she was grateful for the company. "The situation has deteriorated rapidly," Dr. Kelthar said, his form flickering with urgency. "3 outer colonies have gone dark. The last transmission from Kepler Station was disturbing." "What did they report?" "The alien vessels don't just attack settlements, they consume them. Completely. Buildings, technology, even the planetary surface itself. It's as if they're harvesting everything for raw materials." Sarah sank into her chair, the weight of the situation crushing down on her. "I could have warned them. Months ago, if anyone had listened, we could have prepared defenses, evacuation plans, something." "There's still time," Dr. Kelthar said firmly. "Your communication analysis might be the key to understanding these beings, perhaps even negotiating with them. Commander Vexitar will never approve it. He'd rather die than admit a human might be right about something." "Then we don't ask for approval." Sarah looked up sharply. "Doctor, what are you suggesting?" "The station's auxiliary communication array in Section C is rarely monitored. If you could access it without authorization, you might be able to attempt contact. I can provide you with the access codes and create a distraction." "That's mutiny, Doctor. We could both be court-martialed." Dr. Kelthar's form brightened with determination. "Better court-martialed than extinct. These beings have technology that makes our fastest ships look like sailing vessels. If we can't communicate with them, if we can't find some way to coexist, they'll consume everything in their path." Sarah stood and moved to her personal terminal, bringing up the signal analysis she had been working on. "I've identified recurring patterns in their transmissions. Mathematical sequences, prime numbers, basic universal constants. They're definitely trying to communicate, but not in any language our xenolinguistics team would recognize." "What makes you think you can succeed where they failed?" "Because I've been listening to them for months. Because I approach it differently than someone trained in conventional xenolinguistics. Sometimes being an outsider is an advantage." Dr. Kelthar nodded slowly. "What do you need?" 20 minutes later, Sarah crept through the station's maintenance corridors while Dr. Kelthar created a distraction in the main laboratory. She could hear him arguing loudly with other scientists about containment protocols, his voice carrying through the ventilation system. The auxiliary communication array was located in an older section of the station, built when humans first joined the Galactic Alliance. The equipment was outdated by alien standards, but Sarah knew it intimately. She had spent her first year on the station maintaining these very systems. As she powered up the array, Sarah felt a mixture of terror and excitement. She was about to attempt first contact with beings from another galaxy, using equipment her superiors considered primitive. If she failed, she would likely face court-martial. If she succeeded, she might save billions of lives. The communication array hummed to life, its displays showing the alien vessels scattered throughout the system. Sarah adjusted the transmission frequency to match the patterns she had identified in their signals. She took a deep breath and began transmitting. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The aliens' communication method wasn't just audio. It was a complex blend of electromagnetic frequencies, quantum entanglement patterns, and something else entirely. Sarah's human brain struggled to process the information, but gradually patterns began to emerge. Mathematical concepts flowed between them. Basic equations, physical constants, geometric principles. Sarah responded with her own mathematical proofs, establishing that she understood their language. Slowly, painfully, a dialogue began to form. The aliens called themselves the Harvesters, though the concept was more complex than any single word could convey. They were not a species in the traditional sense, but a collective consciousness that had consumed their entire galaxy of origin. They traveled between galaxies not as conquerors, but as gardeners, harvesting the resources of dead civilizations and planting new life in their wake. But they had made a mistake with this galaxy. They had assumed, based on their long-range observations, that the civilizations here were extinct or dying. The discovery of active, thriving species had caught them off guard, and they were uncertain how to proceed. Sarah's hands shook as she transmitted her response. She tried to convey the concept of coexistence, of mutual benefit, of the possibility that both species could thrive without consuming each other. The mathematical dialogue continued for what felt like hours, building understanding one equation at a time. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the station. Security forces had discovered her unauthorized use of the communication array. Sarah could hear boots running in the corridors, getting closer to her location. But the harvesters had received her message. More importantly, they had understood it. Their response came through clearly, a complex pattern that Sarah interpreted as acknowledgement and curiosity. They wanted to know more about these unexpected living civilizations. The door burst open, and Commander Vextar scuttled in with a security team. His multiple eyes blazed with fury as he saw Sarah at the communication controls. "Lieutenant Chen, step away from that equipment immediately. You are under arrest for unauthorized use of military communication systems and violation of first contact protocols." "Commander, wait," Sarah pleaded. "I've established contact. They're not hostile, they're just confused. They thought we were extinct. If we can continue the dialogue—" "Enough!" Vextar's mandibles clicked angrily. "Your reckless actions could have provoked them into attacking us. Security, arrest her immediately." As the guards moved forward, Dr. Kelthar materialized in the doorway. "Commander, look at the tactical display." Vextar turned to the nearest monitor, and his anger transformed into confusion. The alien vessels had stopped their advance toward populated worlds. They were holding position, making no aggressive moves, their weapons powered down. "They're waiting," Sarah said quietly. "They want to continue the dialogue, but only if I'm the one transmitting. I'm the first being they've encountered who can communicate with them properly." Commander Vextar stared at the display, his tactical mind processing the implications. The most powerful threat the galaxy had ever faced had suddenly become passive, and it was apparently due to the actions of the one officer he had consistently dismissed and underestimated. "Dr. Kelthar," he said slowly, "is it your professional opinion that Lieutenant Chen has successfully established meaningful contact with these beings?" "It is, Commander. Her understanding of their communication methods appears to be unique. She may be our only hope for a peaceful resolution." Vexitar's shoulders sagged as the weight of command settled on him. He had built his career on following protocols and trusting in the superiority of advanced alien technology. Now he was being asked to bet the survival of the galaxy on the insights of a human. "Lieutenant Chen," he said finally, "you will continue your communication attempts under my direct supervision. Any deviation from approved protocols will result in immediate termination of contact. Is that understood?" Sarah nodded, though she suspected the harvesters wouldn't be as cooperative with Vextar watching over her shoulder. Still, it was a chance. For the first time in months, someone was actually listening to her. "Understood, Commander. But sir, this is going to take time. Building trust with a collective consciousness from another galaxy isn't something we can rush." Vextar looked at the tactical display again, where dozens of vessels capable of destroying entire worlds waited patiently for the next transmission from a human lieutenant they had barely noticed before today. "Then we'll give you all the time you need. Lieutenant, the future of the galaxy may depend on it." The command center had been transformed into a communication laboratory. Banks of monitors displayed the complex mathematical patterns that Sarah used to speak with the harvesters, while xenolinguistics experts from across the Alliance observed. Her work with a mixture of fascination and professional jealousy. Sarah had been communicating with the collective consciousness for 72 hours straight, sustained only by stimulants and sheer determination. What she had learned challenged everything the galaxy's civilizations believed about life, intelligence, and survival. The harvesters were ancient beyond comprehension. They had consumed their home galaxy not out of malice, but out of necessity. Their original species had faced extinction from a cosmic phenomenon they called the Great Silence, a wave of entropy that swept through galaxies, extinguishing stars and destroying the quantum foundations of reality itself. To survive, they had merged their consciousness with their technology, becoming a collective entity that could adapt and evolve faster than the cosmic threat that pursued them. They harvested dead civilizations not for conquest, but to build vessels capable of carrying life to new galaxies ahead of the advancing silence. They're refugees, Sarah explained to the assembled officers, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. They've been running from this cosmic disaster for millions of years, seeding new galaxies with life while staying ahead of the wave that destroys everything in its path. Commander Vexitar studied the data with a mixture of skepticism and growing alarm. If what they're telling you is true, this great silence you describe is heading toward our galaxy, Sarah finished. They estimate it will arrive in approximately 2,000 years. That sounds like a long time, but they've seen civilizations fail to prepare for threats they considered distant. Dr. Kael'thar floated closer to the displays. What do they propose we do about it? Sarah turned back to her communication array, sending a complex query to the harvesters. The response came back in intricate patterns of mathematics and quantum mechanics that she was still learning to interpret. They want to share their technology with us, not just their defensive systems, but their method of consciousness transfer. They believe that's the only way our civilizations can survive what's coming. Consciousness transfer? The question came from Admiral Korthak, a Kronak warrior who commanded the sector defense fleet. You mean abandoning our physical forms? Not abandoning, evolving. They show me images of the process. Biological consciousness uploaded into quantum matrices that can survive the destruction of entire star systems. Bodies that can be regrown when needed. Minds that can exist in multiple forms simultaneously. The alien officers exchanged glances. The concept challenged fundamental beliefs about the nature of existence held by most galactic species. To abandon biological form, even temporarily, was considered abhorrent by many cultures. There has to be another way, Admiral Korthak said firmly. My people have faced extinction before. We survived through strength and determination, not by running away from our physical heritage. Sarah transmitted the Admiral's concerns to the harvesters. The response was a flood of historical data, showing galaxy after galaxy consumed by the Great Silence. Civilizations that had tried to fight it conventionally had simply ceased to exist. But there was something else in the data. A pattern that Sarah almost missed among the vast flow of information. She isolated it, running it through her analysis programs, and what she found made her heart race. "Commander, look at this," she called out. "The harvesters are showing me something new. There's another option they haven't mentioned before." The mathematical patterns resolved into a three-dimensional model that appeared above the communication array. It showed a galaxy with a unique structure, where the stars were arranged in specific patterns that created a kind of cosmic shield. They call it the Fortress Galaxy Protocol, Sarah explained as the model rotated. If we can restructure our galaxy's stellar arrangement over the next 2 millennia, we can create a barrier that the Great Silence cannot penetrate. But it would require cooperation on a scale never before attempted. Restructure an entire galaxy? Dr. Kael'thar's form flickered with amazement. Move stars themselves? The energy requirements alone would be staggering. That's why they're here, Sarah realized. They're not just refugees. They're engineers. They have the technology and knowledge to help us build this cosmic fortress, but only if we're willing to work together, all of our species, for the next 2,000 years. The implications were staggering. Every civilization in the galaxy would need to contribute resources, technology, and labor on a scale that dwarfed any previous cooperative effort. Ancient enemies would need to become allies. Species that had never even met would need to work toward a common goal. Commander Vexitar was quiet for a long moment, processing the magnitude of what Sarah was describing. "Lieutenant, ask them why they're willing to help us. What do they gain from this arrangement?" Sarah transmitted the question and waited for the response. When it came, it was simpler and more profound than any of them expected. "Hope," she translated. They've been running for so long they had forgotten what it felt like to stand and fight. Our galaxy represents something they thought was lost forever. The possibility of building something that could actually stop the Great Silence instead of just delaying it. "And if we refuse their help?" Admiral Korthak asked. The response to that question came with images that made Sarah's stomach turn. Civilizations reduced to cosmic dust, stars going dark one by one, the slow, inexorable advance of entropy itself. "Then in 2,000 years our galaxy dies," Sarah said quietly. "Every world, every species, Every achievement of our civilizations will be erased as if we never existed. The command center fell silent as the weight of the choice before them became clear. They could maintain their independence and face extinction, or accept help from beings they didn't fully understand, and embark on the greatest construction project in galactic history. "How long do we have to decide?" Commander Vextar asked. Sarah posed the question to the harvesters. The response was immediate and sobering. They need an answer within the next 72 hours. If we're going to begin the Fortress Galaxy protocol, they need to start positioning their construction vessels immediately. Every day we delay pushes the completion date closer to the arrival of the Great Silence. Admiral Korthak's scarred features showed the strain of command. "This decision is beyond my authority, beyond any single commander's authority. The Galactic Council will need to convene immediately. I'll transmit the communication logs and all of Lieutenant Chen's analysis to the council chambers," Commander Vextar said. "But I want her there in person to explain her findings." Sarah felt a surge of nervousness. The Galactic Council included representatives from over 300 species, many of whom shared Vextar's original skepticism about human capabilities. She would be asking them to bet the future of their civilizations on her interpretation of alien mathematics. "Sir, what if they don't believe me? What if they think this is all some elaborate deception?" Commander Vexistar looked at her with something approaching respect. "Lieutenant, you've accomplished something that our finest xenolinguistics experts said was impossible. You've established meaningful communication with beings from another galaxy and potentially saved us from extinction. I think it's time for the Council to listen to what humanity has to say." As the station prepared for the emergency council session, Sarah returned to her communication array for one final exchange with the harvesters. She wanted to understand more about these beings who had traveled so far to offer help to strangers. What she learned in those final moments of private communication would prove to be the most important information of all. The harvesters had a secret, something they hadn't shared with the assembled officers, something that would change everything when the time came to implement their plan. But for now, Sarah kept that knowledge to herself. There would be time to reveal it when the galaxy was ready to hear it. First, she had to convince 300 species to work together toward a common goal. The future of everything depended on her ability to make them understand that sometimes the most overlooked voices carry the most important messages. The Galactic Council chamber was a cathedral of democracy, its crystalline walls rising hundreds of meters into a dome that showed real-time images of every member world. Sarah stood at the central podium, dwarfed by the 300 alien representatives who filled the amphitheater-style seating around her. She had never felt smaller or more alone. To her left sat the Zephyrian delegation, their crystalline bodies refracting the chamber's light into rainbow patterns. To her right, the massive forms of Kronak warriors dominated an entire section, their battle-scarred hides telling stories of conflicts across the galaxy. Above her, Etherian representatives floated in gravitational fields, their translucent forms shimmering like living auroras. And at the highest tier, the most advanced species in the galaxy observed with expressions ranging from skeptical to openly hostile. The transcendence beings who had evolved beyond physical form millennia ago existed as pure consciousness within geometric force fields. They had been the first to question why the Council should listen to a species that had only achieved faster-than-light travel within the last century. Council Speaker Ythmarai, an ancient being whose species Sarah couldn't even identify, activated the translation matrix. The emergency session will come to order. Lieutenant Sarah Chen of the Terran Confederation will present her findings regarding the entities calling themselves harvesters. Sarah activated her presentation, and the chamber filled with three-dimensional displays of the mathematical patterns she had been analyzing. Despite months of preparation, her voice still shook as she began to speak. "Honored representatives, what I'm about to tell you will challenge everything we believe about survival, cooperation, and the future of our galaxy." For the next 3 hours, Sarah presented her evidence, the signal analysis that had first detected the harvesters, the communication protocols she had developed to establish meaningful dialogue, the terrifying truth about the Great Silence that was slowly consuming galaxies across the universe. But most importantly, she explained the Fortress Galaxy Protocol and what it would require from every civilization in the chamber. Every species would need to contribute according to their capabilities, Sarah explained, gesturing to the stellar engineering displays. The Zephyrian's crystal technology would be essential for the quantum resonance chambers. Kronak Industrial Might would provide the raw materials needed for stellar manipulation. Etherian consciousness-linking abilities would coordinate the massive construction efforts across multiple star systems simultaneously. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of translated voices. Representatives argued in dozens of languages while their concerns flowed through the universal translation system. "This is madness," declared Ambassador Thex Nari of the Hegemony Coalition. "You're asking us to restructure our entire civilization based on the word of beings we've never encountered before today. And on the analysis of a human," added Councillor Rektar, his tone making the species designation sound like an insult. "A species that has contributed virtually nothing to galactic civilization except primitive enthusiasm." Sarah felt the familiar burn of dismissal, but this time it was different. This time she had something more than hope to sustain her. She had truth backed by data that even the most prejudiced council member couldn't completely ignore. "Councillor Rektar," she said, her voice carrying across the chamber with surprising strength. "You're right that humanity is young by galactic standards. We've only been part of the Alliance for 67 years, but sometimes it takes a fresh perspective to see what others have missed." She activated a new display, showing the signal analysis that had started everything. "Every advanced civilization in this chamber has sophisticated sensor networks. Your technology is centuries ahead of ours, but not one of you detected the Harvester's approach because you weren't looking for the impossible." The transcendent representative, a geometric pattern of pure energy, pulsed with interest. "Explain. You were looking for conventional faster-than-light signatures, drive emissions, gravitational distortions, quantum wake patterns, all the things that civilizations in this galaxy use for interstellar travel. But the Harvesters don't travel through space the way we do. They travel through dimensions we haven't even discovered yet." Sarah brought up the dimensional analysis she'd been working on with Dr. Kael'thar. "They exist partially outside our reality. That's how they can move so quickly between galaxies, and why our sensors couldn't detect them until they chose to make themselves known." "Even if we accept your analysis," said Ambassador Kael'wyn of the Stellar Republic, "the scope of what you're proposing is unprecedented. Moving stars themselves, building megastructures on a galactic scale, the energy requirements alone would drain every power source we have." "That's where the Harvester's technology comes in," Sarah replied. "They've developed zero-point energy extraction on a scale we can barely comprehend. They can tap directly into the quantum vacuum, drawing unlimited power from the fabric of space itself." She paused, knowing that what she was about to reveal would be the most controversial part of her presentation. "But there's something else. Something the Harvesters told me in our private communications that I haven't shared until now." The chamber fell silent. Every representative focused on her words. "The Fortress Galaxy Protocol isn't just about building a barrier against the Great Silence. It's about evolution. About becoming something greater than we are individually. The stellar engineering project would require a level of cooperation and coordination that would essentially merge our civilizations into a single, unified entity." The reaction was immediate and explosive. Representatives leaped to their feet, their voices creating a storm of outrage and disbelief. Ancient enemies who had been fighting for millennia recoiled at the idea of working together, let alone merging their cultures. "You're talking about the end of individual civilizations," shouted General Morthak of the warrior clans. "The extinction of everything that makes us unique." "No," Sarah said firmly, raising her voice above the chaos. "I'm talking about evolution, about becoming something capable of surviving threats that would destroy us separately." She activated the final display, showing the Harvester's own history. Images of a galaxy teeming with thousands of unique species, each contributing their strengths to a collective effort that had allowed them to survive the impossible. The Harvesters weren't always a collective consciousness. They were once hundreds of different species just like us, but when faced with extinction, they chose cooperation over competition. They chose survival over pride, and they're offering us the same choice. Council Speaker Weithmarai raised a tentacle for silence. "Lieutenant Chen, you're asking us to fundamentally transform our entire galaxy, based on the word of beings who have already admitted to consuming their own. How do we know this isn't an elaborate deception? How do we know they won't simply harvest us once we've lowered our defenses?" Sarah had expected this question, and she had an answer that she hoped would convince them, because they've already had the opportunity to harvest us and they chose not to. They have the technology to consume our entire galaxy in a matter of months. The fact that we're having this conversation proves their intentions are genuine. She gestured to the displays showing the harvester vessels maintaining their peaceful positions throughout the system. They're waiting, honored speaker. Waiting for us to make a choice that will determine not just our survival, but the survival of countless other galaxies that the Great Silence hasn't reached yet. Other galaxies? The question came from Dr. Sevalnath, the chief xenobiologist of the Science Consortium. The harvesters have been seeding life throughout the universe as they flee the Great Silence. There are dozens of galaxies out there with young civilizations that will face the same choice we're facing now. If we can make the Fortress Galaxy Protocol work, we become a beacon of hope for everyone else. If we fail, they'll have no choice but to keep running. The chamber was quiet now, the weight of cosmic responsibility settling on every representative. Sarah could see the struggle playing out on alien faces as they grappled with a decision that went beyond politics or territorial disputes. The harvesters have given us 72 hours to decide, Sarah continued, but I believe the real decision isn't about whether to trust them. It's about whether we trust each other, whether we believe that our differences make us weak, or whether we recognize that our diversity is our greatest strength. She looked up at the transcendence, whose geometric forms pulsed with deep thought. You've all achieved greatness as individual species, but imagine what we could achieve together. Imagine what problems we could solve, what wonders we could create, if we combined Chronac strength with Zephyrian precision, Etherian consciousness with human adaptability. And if you're wrong? Asked Ambassador Thexnari. If this is all an elaborate trap? Sarah met the alien's gaze steadily. Then we'll face it together, and that will still make us stronger than we were apart. Council Speaker With Marai looked around the chamber, gauging the mood of the representatives. The chair will entertain a motion for recess to allow for delegation consultations. Honored Speaker, Sarah said quickly. There's one more thing. 5 years had passed since the Council's historic vote to accept the Harvester's proposal. Sarah stood on the observation deck of the Harmony Station, watching massive construction vessels move stars like chess pieces across the cosmic board. The sight still took her breath away, even after witnessing it countless times. The decision hadn't been unanimous. 47 species had voted against the proposal, choosing instead to maintain their independence and face whatever came. Most had eventually changed their minds as they witnessed the incredible progress being made. But a few holdout worlds still refused to participate in what they called the Great Submission. Sarah wore the insignia of Special Ambassador now, a rank created specifically for her role as the primary liaison with the Harvester Collective. But it was the small medal on her left breast that meant the most to her. The Order of Galactic Unity, awarded by unanimous council vote for extraordinary service in the preservation of galactic civilization, her parents had cried when they saw the ceremony broadcast to Earth. Ambassador, a familiar voice called from behind her. Sarah turned to see Dr. Kael'thar approaching, his Etherian form now enhanced with Harvester biotechnology that allowed him to interface directly with the construction network. How are the modifications coming along, Doctor? Beyond our most optimistic projections, Dr. Kael'thar replied, his excitement visible in the way his form brightened. The consciousness-linking protocols you developed have allowed us to coordinate construction efforts across 17 different star systems simultaneously. We're actually ahead of schedule, Sarah smiled at the irony. The communication skills that had once been dismissed as primitive human intuition were now considered essential to the greatest engineering project in galactic history. Her ability to bridge the gap between organic consciousness and artificial intelligence had made her indispensable to the Fortress Galaxy Protocol. Any word from the outer construction sites? She asked. The Chronac engineering teams have successfully repositioned the Vega system. The stellar anchor points are holding perfectly, and the Zephyrian quantum resonance network came online this morning. When we activate the next phase, we'll have a functional barrier covering nearly 10% of the galaxy. Through the viewport, Sarah could see one of the Harvester megavessels, its organic hull now merged seamlessly with Alliance technology. The fusion of their civilizations had produced innovations that neither could have achieved alone. Harvester biotechnology combined with Alliance quantum science had created tools capable of manipulating matter on a subatomic level. But the real miracle was the cooperation itself. Species that had been enemies for millennia now worked side by side, their ancient grudges set aside in the face of a common goal. The warrior clans shared their industrial might with the pacifist gardener worlds. The isolationist crystal collectives opened their most sacred technologies to outside inspection. Ambassador Chen, please report to Communication Base 7, the station's AI announced. Priority transmission from the Harvester primary node. Sarah made her way through corridors that bustled with activity. Engineers from dozens of species worked together on projects that would have been impossible without their combined expertise. She passed a team of humans and transcendents developing new faster-than-light communication protocols, their biological intuition paired with pure, mathematical consciousness to solve problems that had stymied researchers for centuries. Communication Base 7 had been specially designed for her work with the Harvesters. The organic interface panels seemed to grow from the walls themselves, pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that responded to her thoughts as much as her touch. Ambassador Chen, the Harvester Collective's translated voice filled the chamber. We have important news to share. Sarah settled into the biomechanical chair that had been grown specifically for her physiology. What is it? Our deep space monitoring stations have detected the Great Silence's approach vector. It is moving faster than our previous calculations indicated. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. How much faster? The barrier must be completed within 400 years instead of the projected 800. This will require significant acceleration of the construction timeline. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. They would need to double their construction rate, which meant asking every species to commit even more resources, more ships, more lives to the project. Is it possible? She asked. With your current technology and cooperation levels, it would be extremely difficult. However, we have been observing your species' adaptability with great interest. Humans have shown a remarkable ability to innovate under pressure. We believe you may hold the key to the acceleration we need. What do you mean? The Harvester response came with a flood of data that Sarah's enhanced neural interface struggled to process. Images of human settlements throughout the galaxy, showing adaptations and innovations that other species had overlooked. Humans working in environments that should have been impossible, solving problems with solutions that seemed to defy conventional logic. Your species approaches challenges differently than others, the collective explained. Where other civilizations see obstacles, humans see opportunities. This perspective may be essential for the rapid advancement we require. Sarah studied the data, seeing patterns that the Harvesters had identified. Human colonies that had thrived in impossible conditions by thinking outside conventional parameters. Human engineers who had improved alien technology by ignoring the assumptions built into its design. Human diplomats who had resolved conflicts by finding solutions that satisfied needs no one else had recognized. You want us to lead the acceleration project, Sarah realized. We want you specifically to coordinate it. Your unique position as the bridge between our civilizations makes you the logical choice, but it will require convincing the Council to embrace solutions that may seem radical, even by current standards. Sarah thought about the magnitude of what they were asking, not just to speed up the construction, but to revolutionize their entire approach to galactic engineering, to think beyond the conventional wisdom of civilizations that were thousands of years older than humanity. What kind of radical solutions? The answer came as a series of theoretical frameworks that made Sarah's enhanced mind real. Techniques for manipulating space-time itself. Methods for converting entire star systems into construction materials. Technologies that blurred the line between organic and artificial consciousness. Some of these approaches would fundamentally change what it means to be a biological species, Sarah said slowly. Yes, but they would also ensure survival. The question is whether your galaxy is ready to evolve beyond its current limitations. Sarah closed her eyes and thought about Earth, about her family, about the countless worlds that depended on the success of their project. She thought about the species that had dismissed humanity as primitive, who were now looking to them for salvation. I'll present the proposal to the Council, she said finally, but I can't guarantee they'll accept it. Some of these changes, they'll see them as the end of everything they consider sacred. And what do you see them as, Ambassador? Sarah opened her eyes and looked at the biomechanical interface that had become as natural to her as breathing. She thought about the young lieutenant who had been overlooked and dismissed, whose efforts had seemed insignificant until the day they saved everything. "I see them as the beginning," she said. "The beginning of something greater than any of us could have imagined alone." 6 months later, Sarah stood once again in the Galactic Council chamber, but this time she was not alone. Representatives from the Harvester Collective flanked her, their biomechanical forms a testament to what evolution could achieve when driven by necessity rather than fear. The vote was closer this time. The acceleration proposal passed by only 12 votes, with many species expressing concerns about the pace of change. But it passed, and that was what mattered. As Sarah watched the construction vessels begin implementing the new protocols, she reflected on the journey that had brought them all to this point. She thought about the medal on her chest, about the recognition that had finally come not just to her but to her entire species. But mostly, she thought about the future. About the galaxy they were building together, where differences were celebrated rather than dismissed, where the most overlooked voices often carried the most important messages. The great silence was still coming, but they would be ready for it. Not as separate species fighting for individual survival, but as a unified civilization that had learned to see strength in diversity and wisdom in unexpected places. And at the center of it all, a human woman who had never stopped believing that sometimes the universe needs those who are brave enough to speak when no one else is listening. The stars themselves bore witness to their efforts, ancient lights rearranged into patterns of hope that would shine across the cosmos for eons to come. It was, Sarah realized, the most beautiful thing any civilization had ever built. And it had started with signals in the static that only she had been willing to hear.